Okay, I'm going to read this from Zahir by Paulo Coalho. It's page 283. Um, and he's talking to a reporter in the book, and he says, "Have you ever heard of the law of Jante?" "No, I haven't," he said. "Well, it's been in existence since the beginning of civilization, but it was only officially set down in 1933 by a Danish writer in the small town of Jante. The powers that came up with 10 commandments telling people how they should behave, and it seems to exist not only in Jante but everywhere else too. If I had to sum it up in one sentence, I'd say mediocrity and anonymity are the safest choices. If you opt for them, you'll never face any major problems in life, but if you try to be different..." "I'd like to know what these Jante commandments are," said the journalist, who seemed genuinely interested. "I don't have them here, but I can summarize if you like." I went over to my computer and printed out a condensed and edited version. "You are nobody. Never even dare to think that you know more than we do. You are of no importance. You can do nothing right. Your work is of no significance. But as long as you never challenge us, you will live a happy life. Always take what we say seriously and never laugh at our opinions." The journalist folded up the piece of paper and put it in his pocket. "You're right. If you're a nobody, if your work has no impact, then it deserves to be praised. If, however, you climb out of that state of mediocrity and are a success, then you're defying the law and deserve to be punished." I was so pleased that he had reached this conclusion of his own. "And it isn't only the critics who say that," I added. "More people, far more people than you think, say exactly the same thing." Why am I reading this about the law, Jante? Because I think that there's a big thing that I don't know. You have to kind of be like uh, have a load of credentials, blah blah blah, before you're allowed to say anything, and actually, um, these rules, these laws, are the kind of the way we seem to approach things, and that it's ego for anybody to speak about anything, and that's the way they stifle our communications, and then the only communications that exist tend to be those that are enforced on us by the apparent authority figures, which are endowed apparently with permission to go against these rules, because they are the we that they're talking about in these rules. So this is a Wikipedia page. 10 rules state: "You're not to think you're anything special. You're not to think you're as good as we are. You're not to think you're as smart as we are. You're not to imagine yourself better than we are. You're not to think you know more than we do. You're not to think you are more important than we are. You are not to think you are good at anything. You are not to laugh at us. You are not to think anyone cares about you. You're not to think you can teach us anything." And so that's kind of a very, very pervasive underlying set of assumptions, which I think the author Paulo Coalho is right in pointing out exists obviously, very obviously, with the critics. In that passage, he's talking about how he was popular with the critics until such time as he became, bestseller kind of level, and then, of course, once he was popular, he was never again popular with the critics. And these rules kind of underlie that so long as you remain in your place, then you're okay. But if you actually speak, and you should not speak. It's a little bit like the very old formalism of, that women and children should not speak unless spoken to, and the old formal patriarchal system, I guess. But um, So I've come across this attitude, you know, that oh, if you post your opinions on Facebook or on YouTube, then you must be arrogant or something like that. Because there's a lot of people ascribe to this view, and then we can add a few extra rules here for interpreting anyone who steps outside of that view as being either arrogant, ignorant, etc. Um, but I just say that it's not arrogant to speak. It's arrogant to assume that you're the only one who can speak or should speak. That would be arrogant. But in fact, everybody has a perspective, everybody has their set of experiences, and therefore everybody has something to contribute to the discussion and the debate. But that that involves being able to actually listen to each other and to discuss and to talk, rather than the modus operandi of trying to win an argument by saying I'm right and you're wrong, which you can say this is why I think I'm right, but for example, the old sort of proverb about the elephant, and the blind people, and one of them's up against the side of it and says it's a wall. Another one's got the tail, it's a snake. Another one's got the ear, it's a fan, etc. And they all see different things because they all have different parts of the picture. Now, if those guys started to debate in the way that a lot of people these days seem to debate, which is I'm right, you're wrong, so they all duff it out, and then eventually one of them comes out as the apparent winner, although that rarely happens. Mostly people just get a lot of ill feeling and nobody changes their opinion anyway. But even if they did, would they actually have succeeded in learning anything about the elephant? No, because they just have taken on the perspective of one of the people who happen to dominate the others, rather than to bring together the set of information that's available to them. And that only happens when we're able to listen to other people, rather than to polarize and to break everything down into a sort of duality, which reduces to something like a Punch and Judy show, where people just stuff it out, usually with very little in the way of actual argument for their side. But even when they have that, their only intention is to persuade the other side that they're wrong, and they do that they're wrong rationally, but also in other ways as well. So the reason for making this video is I do think that if you're listening to this video and thinking, I'd quite like to do a YouTube video about tennis because I like playing tennis or something like that, and maybe you're not the best tennis player in the world, but you enjoy tennis, then I'd say go ahead and do it, and don't listen to these critics. These rules are only there to stifle us and to force us into this jacket of conformity, as and they're limiting, and don't let them limit us. So I think it's not an act of ego necessarily to want to speak. That's a realization that you have things that you want to say and actually trying to say them. And that's not trying to put yourself above anyone else who, I feel quite strongly ought to do the same as well. Okay.